Now this figure 18-40 deals with sizing the disconnect and ensuring that the disconnect is at least equal to the horsepower of the motor. Now, when you size a disconnect, you always want to refer to first to 430.109A1, there on page 326 of your code book, and make sure that the disconnect is equivalent to the horsepower of the motor. So the motor's 50 horsepower, three-phase, so this disconnect needs to be at least 50 horsepower. Now, 430.110A, also on page 326, you want to ensure that it is large enough to disconnect the full load current rating of the motor under starting conditions, lock rotor conditions, and that kind of thing, and accelerating the load. So those sections are very important to review. Then you notice also in the illustration you have your controller, and of course you know figure 18-36 gave information and requirements about sizing the controller. It also had to be at least 50 horsepower to be acceptable as a controller to start and motor and de-energize the motor and so forth. And that was 430.83A1. But figure 18-36, illustrates that. And then when we locate our disconnecting means, look at figure 18-48, and you'll pick up a lot of information there about where the disconnect has to be located in relation to the controller and the motor, see? So in step one in sizing the disconnect in the illustration, a 50 horse motor requires a 50 horse power disconnect in accordance with 430.109A1. Now we're just illustrating the horsepower rating of the disconnect here and giving the general rule in 430.109A1. But again, we want to make sure we review 430.109A1, and we would want to look at 430.110A, and remember that's 430.109A1, and then look at 430.102, and those sections, those three together will always locate your disconnect, size your disconnect, for the motor to disconnect it and energize it and so forth, that's which is required to make sure that we start the motor and the motor will accelerate its driven load. And that's what this figure 18-40 is illustrating.